music. You are now entering parallel universe.
And wipe your feet on the way in.
Marc Riley, BBC Six Music.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire. I'll take you to burn. Fire. I'll take you to learn. I'll see you burn. You fought hard and you saved and earned, but all of it's gone to burn. And your mind, you turn in mind, you know you've really been so blind. Now's your time, burn your mind, you fall apart, too far behind. Oh no, you're gonna burn. Fire to destroy all you've done. Fire to end all you've become. I'll feel you burn. You've been living like a little girl in the middle of your little world. And your tiny mind, you know you've really been so blind. Now's your time, burn your mind, you've fallen far too far behind. Fire, I'll take you to burn. Fire, I'll take you to learn. You're gonna burn. You're gonna burn. You're gonna burn, 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 fire. Take it to burn. Fire. I take it to learn. Fire. I take it to burn.
I think that effect must have just been invented. That was The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and this is The Crazy World of Rob Hughes with the Parallel Universe. And of course, Arthur Brown, famous for setting his helmet on fire.
Yeah. Oh, you did that. And he burned his head, didn't he?
He did.
He used to wear a little contraption that burnt top of his head. But he still did
I
it.
think
anyway.
really, in short, I think what we're saying is don't do it, kids.
No, definitely not. Definitely
You've
not.
got to be responsible, haven't you?
Not only that, but he used to kind of come out into the stage, didn't he, for the finale, sort of through the ceiling, sort of being lowered onto the stage. A bit like Michael Crawford did when he was doing Frank Spencer, the Christmas Angel show.
I'm sure
it was a
it
bit
was,
like that.
I'm sure it was very like that, Bob. And if you think about it, I mean, he kind of got involved in all the theatrics and everything, which set up a lot of other people, not least Alice Cooper. And I think Alice Cooper does admit that. But of course, just a little bit before that, with the theatrics and the ghoulishness, if you like, Screaming Lord Sutch, anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. You can trace that line, if you like, can't you, from Screaming Lord Sutch through to Bowie and Peter Gabriel and beyond.
There was also the band The Undertakers, wasn't there? Wasn't Lemmy in The Undertakers? And they used to bring the singer on in the coffin.
That's right. Which Dave Vanian ended up doing, didn't he, in the early days of The Damned, I believe.
Excellent.
All right. Anyway, I've got to remind, I don't know whether it's just a mixture of the fact you've got a white T-shirt on and my screen, but there's a kind of little sort of angelic halo around you tonight. I'm not sure quite what to make of that.
That's just me, Bob.
Melody Maker, 17th of August 1968. On the front page, the Mothers of Invention, Americans' avant-garde pop group, are coming to Britain in October. The group, which has been called the Great American Nightmare, appear in 2 concerts at the Royal Festival Hall in London. To coincide with the trip, MGM are releasing their most recent American album, Lumpy Gravy. The Mothers' last visit was in September last year when they appeared at the Royal Albert Hall. Of this concert, Melody Maker said it was almost a freak out, not a love-in, most definitely a send-up. Without doubt, this is one of the greatest live performances to have shaken the earth on this side of the Atlantic for a long time. So, I mean, they would polarise people, definitely, but to see the Mothers in 68.
To see that lineup will be incredible. And I tell you, I mean, you say like now, kids might not recognise Frank Zappa or even have heard of him, but I'm bringing my kids up right because my Beth sent me a panel of a door in a well-known pub chain, and she said, "Is it just me, Dad, or can you see Frank Zappa in the wood grain?" And he was there, mate. I'll show it to you.
I'm sure, yeah, I'll have a look.
I
I'm
will.
sure he was.
I will.
Sure he was. Just above that, the Beatles' new single, Hey Jude, at 7 minutes and 5 seconds, their longest ever, will be released on their new Apple label. The B-side is Revolution. Hey Jude features Paul McCartney in the main vocal role. It also features a 40-piece orchestra. On the same day as the single is released, Apple also released 3 others. Their Sour Milk Sea by Jackie Lomax, the theme from the London Weekend TV series Thingamabob by the Black Dyke Mills Band, produced and composed by McCartney, and Those Were the Days by Mary Hopkin. So it's all going on at Apple, isn't it? They're throwing everything at it. I know it didn't end happily in the end, but it seemed to be such a creative time at this point.
Whenever I'm given the opportunity to jump in with the Ruttles, but there's the Ruttle Core, was it? Oh, was it?
Ruttle Core, yeah.
And so the story being, the parallel being drawn, which did bear comparison, was whilst they were outside being interviewed by George Harrison, I think it might have been.
It was,
but there's people just stealing stuff, like, stuffed grizzly bears and settees and all sorts just coming out the door looking very furtive. And that's kind of what happened. It was a free-for-all of the best of intentions, but of course, people just plundered it and took advantage woefully, didn't they?
They did. I mean, they employed people like Magic Alex, didn't they, to build a studio for them? And he had like all these different things. Like he created this special psychedelic paint that was supposed to sort of repel bad vibrations. And he painted Ringo's car, all that kind of stuff. But they indulged it all, and
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I could be wrong because I love the Beatles, and a lot of people are sniffy about McCartney. I love Paul McCartney. But I wonder if, in a way, Apple was the kind of the result of the... not the result, but the cause of the Beatles splitting up in the first place, because they ended up being skint, didn't they?
Yes,
and
that's
then
right.
kind of what drove a wedge through them was the Alan Klein and accountants and all that kind of stuff, trying to drag them out of a hole. And obviously Paul McCartney wanted to go in one direction, John Lennon the other. And so I wonder if in a roundabout way that actual institution was responsible for sending them the different ways in the first place.
Yeah, I get your point, beginning of the end, really. I mean, you could see why they did it, because it was that idea of autonomy, wasn't it, after being on EMI and Parlophone, just to have complete control over everything. But, of course, then you get lots of people trying to have their say and trying to muscle in on that.
I mean, incredibly naive to think that, we'll just give things away and everything will be great and people will love it. Then everybody just takes advantage and then you end up with nothing. So it's cautionary tale there for take that.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. I just want to go back to that single by the Black Dyke Mills Band, Thingamabob, because this was a story, wasn't it? We've heard this story. It's quite famous about Paul McCartney going up to record the Black Dyke Mills Band in Saltaire near Bradford, and it was a Sunday in the middle of the summer, I think. And on the way back, they drove back to London. There's quite a few of them there, big sort of entourage. Drove back to London, and they were really, really peckish. They wanted to get some food. It was Sunday, nowhere was open. They stopped at a little village called Harold and saw a guy there clipping his hedge, and just said to him very kindly, look, is there any way we can go for a sandwich and something to drink? And he said, no, everywhere's closed, but you can come into our house and we'll give you something. So everybody trooped in there. Paul McCartney ended up playing a load of songs for his wife and his kids, and then they went to the local pub and spent the evening in the pub, and one of the songs he played was Hey Jude, when he'd written it like less than a week before.
Wow.
It was just incredible, just all sat around the piano.
Great story.
Also, page 4, Incredible String Band, completed their as yet untitled fourth LP this week, produced for Elektra by Joe Boyd for Witch Season Productions. Another Witch Season group, the Fairport Convention, are working on their second album, Olympic, this week, to be released by Polydor later this year. Both groups appear in the Magical Mystery Tour presented by Middle-earth at a secret venue at the end of August. So this is like a golden era for British folk rock, wasn't it? I mean, the Fairport album was going to be what we did on our holidays, but as we'll kind of discover later as well in this issue of Melody Maker, you just get the feeling that the musical culture is changing. You know, things are coming through that we sort of revere today.
Name names, or are you going to do that later?
I'll do that later, mate. I'll do it later.
Fairly do.
Okay, The Move have a new single, Wild Tiger Lady, a Roy Wood composition being released this week. Meanwhile, Tony Secunda, the group's manager, said earlier this week that all differences between The Move and himself were now resolved and association between them had been resumed. Everything now is bigger and better than ever before, he stated. Well, for a start, it's Wild Tiger Woman. But the rest, I have been lucky enough to meet Roy Wood, and we talked about, being taken to the cleaners really because he wrote so many songs. And like we've said before, people sign away publishing or don't quite understand the contract, and they get stuck in this kind of rut that they can't get out of.
Well, they were caught in that period, which was probably the worst in musical history, wasn't it? Because the bands were just starting to sell so many records, between 1967 and 1970, say. And you had the managers there who had been in all walks of life, wrestling promoters and all kinds of things, and opportunists, and not daft, wily, a good deal older, twice as old as the bands that they were looking after. And these kids were just starstruck and thinking, oh, yeah, can you imagine? So, yeah, it was a pretty typical story, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. On the singles front, not a lot to shout about. There's Traffics You Can All Join In, which is called Astoundingly Commercial. Also, though, there's Aretha Franklin, I Say a Little Prayer.
One of the greatest tunes ever, so I think we need to, don't we, Bob?
We do.
In my hand now, and wondering what dress to
Hard to beat. Aretha Franklin, I say a little prayer. Hard to beat unless you can grab hold of him by the neck and just put him to the floor. But you wouldn't do that because he's a lovely man. He's Rob Hughes.
Right, looking at Melody Maker here, 17th of August 1968. That is just unimpeachable, isn't it? I say a little prayer.
Yeah.
In the news, Dusty Springfield has signed a contract with Atlantic Records, who'll hold all their American releases from August onwards. Under the new deal, Dusty will record in the States under the supervision of the label's boss, Jerry Wexler. She'll fly to America in September for 8 days of recording in Memphis. So the result of this, of course, was Dusty in Memphis, wasn't it, with Wexler producing, which is a classic, and completely reinvigorated her career and suggested also that Memphis was her spiritual home, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, she sounded right for it. It was a great soul voice, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We mentioned about this sort of culture changing before. So this is in the Focus on Folk page on page 23 in tiny, tiny print halfway down. Flaxen-haired Joni Mitchell is a young Canadian songwriter whose songs are fast gaining recognition on both sides of the Atlantic. Tom Rush and Judy Collins have already recorded some of their songs on their albums, and now Joni herself is heard on Joni Mitchell, aka Song to a Seagull album, as a singer in her own right. The melody lines are well suited, never getting in the way of the words. There's a satisfying simplicity about this talented young lad's music. I presume they just missed the Y off. And also an intriguing depth. Joni Mitchell would probably get much fuller acknowledgement, and this album is a good step in that direction. So it's the start. Well, it's kind of the start, really. We're looking at sort of 1968 here. The start of the whole singer-songwriter movement, if you like.
Right, okay. It's funny because I was talking to Liz Berg about this programme that he's on. I can't remember which feed it's on, but it's called Daisy and the Six. And there's the Daisy in question is actually Elvis Presley's granddaughter who plays her. But she's writing all of these songs, and it's supposed to be based around Fleetwood Mac, but you can tell there's an element of Joni Mitchell in there as well from the way it's presented.
Right, okay. I mean, you can't imagine, sort of women singer-songwriters without Joni Mitchell, can't you? Because she did change everything. She really did.
Well, the premise of that programme that I'm talking about isn't very good, by the way. But anyway, the premise is that they just get taken for granted and always seem to be like a man's muse or whatever, that kind of patronising,
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about slightly patronising. Janis Joplin here on page 12, interview by Carl Dallas. She wears a micro-length dress with a neckline plunging down to the navel. She swoops around the stage like some kind of female bat about to get a thrill from drinking your blood. Her voice rises to a hoarse screech, then falls to a husky whisper. She wears a wildly decorated cape, which she suddenly discards on stage. But off stage, the rock and roll woman of Big Brother and the Holding Company, Janis Joplin, the 25-year-old ex-college dropout, is probably the world's sexiest white female singer. Is something quite different from her overpowering public image. Definitely a kind of prose there of the time, isn't it?
Something going on there apart from the music, I would say, yeah.
Definitely. She's a thoughtful, shy, slightly cynical girl who has no illusions about what she's doing musically and not too sure about where it's all going to lead. What I'm doing, she says, is a product of my own head. What actually happened was I heard Leadbelly when I was 15. I thought, there it is, the sort of music I want. Nobody expected me to be a singer. My parents wanted me to be a sociology teacher, but up to a couple of years ago, I was a complete failure. Then I started singing with this band and wow, my parents came to see me sing recently and they seemed pleased I was a success. Everybody has got so used to the idea I was a failure, and now suddenly there I was. That's all that really matters to them, I think. They don't really relate to me much, she said sadly, which is a sad tale, isn't it? Because I know she had a terrible time when she's back home in Texas, when she was at college. She was kind of picked on a lot, wasn't she? Yeah, she was.
Yeah, it's an awful story.
It's awful. And then she went out to the West Coast and just became this absolute megastar. It only sort of grew over the years. Ginger Baker by Chris Welsh here. He gets invited round to his expensive new house in Harrow to have lunch. Peter Ginger Baker will be 29 soon, he says, and after 13 years of beating drum kits, he's at last able to relax, enjoy the fruits of success. He's bought antique furniture, carpets, decorative weapons, and the most fascinating acquisition, an 8-foot-long fish tank that stretches the length of his living room wall.
The bit I would be worried about there was decorative weapons, because I wonder if he meant them to be decorative or they're just for a backup. Having seen Beware Mr. Baker, you could be forgiven for thinking the former.
Definitely. If you haven't seen Beware Mr. Baker, I suggest people out there should see it, because it needs to be seen, definitely.
Even if you don't like him, the music he made, it's just one of those documentaries, isn't it?
It is, definitely. LP front, very quickly, we've heard Arthur Brown, Small Faces, we've got Ogden's Nut Gone Flake out.
Afterglow. Small Faces and Afterglow, Mark Riley, Bob Hughes, Parallel Universe.
Yeah, Melody Maker, 17th of August 1968. Steve Marriott. Oh, one of the great soul voices. No doubt about it. Gigs this week, you got Joe Cocker at Mothers in Birmingham, 10 years after at the Marquee. Junior's Eyes at the Queen's Staghounds in Ascot. Fleetwood Mac at the Nag's Head in southwest London. The Free, as they were known, at the Crown Hotel in Twickenham. P.P. Arnold at Glastonbury Town Hall. Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation at the California Ballroom in Dunstable. John Mayall, Gino Washington, Fleetwood Mac and Freddie Mac at the Bluesology Festival in Droitwich. Crazy World of Arthur Brown at Middle Earth at the Roundhouse, Chalk Farm. Downliners Sect at Eel Pie Island in Twickenham. Ron Geeson at the Hanging Lamp in Richmond. David Graham at Les Cousins in Soho. The Pentangle, as they were known, at Edinburgh's New University Theatre. And Benny King at the Clockwork Orange in Manchester. I didn't even know there was a club called Clockwork Orange.
Never heard of that.
Right. On the live front, you've got The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Jeff Beck, The Nice and Jerry Lee Lewis by Chris Welsh. It says music triumphed despite accidents, rockers, rain and neighbours at the 8th National Jazz and Blues Festival, the 3-day event in Kempton Park, watched by 60,000 fans from all over Britain and the continent. Patience was rewarded with Sunday's 2 concerts, which ran free of trouble and proved a day of recognition for the new wave blues bands of Jethro Tull and Chicken Shack. Fancy referring to Jethro Tull as new wave.
Well, yeah, I've never heard that phrase used that early on, so fair play to whoever it was. They must have invented it, but for Jethro Tull, a new wave of what?
Yeah, well, yeah, blues. All week, heavy rain had threatened to turn the grounds into swampland and Wellington boots became essential equipment. Mercifully, the downpour stopped just before the show was due to start on Friday night with Taste, who warmed up the crowds despite the traditional cry of get off from a small army of rockers in town for their idol Jerry Lee Lewis. The rockers were upset when Marmalade came on early and started caterwauling. Compere John G bravely suggested to them, go fill your mouths with fish and chips instead. I bet he stayed on the stage and said that.
I love the word upset. It's like they're all crying and, like, you know, heads on shoulders and stuff. Great.
Just very, very briefly, Simon and Garfunkel at London's Royal Albert Hall. They were good. Paul Simon, it says, slight and dark-haired, writes the songs. London is actually second home. He really began his songwriting career in British folk clubs and even now will suddenly turn up at places like Les Cousins in Greek Street and say hello to his old mates, because as we know, he travelled around in a van, didn't he, with Roy Harper and Jackson C. Frank and all that.
Certainly
living
did.
in the trade. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, it makes sense to go to Simon and Garfunkel, but we're not going to do that.
No, there is some really, really awkward footage of Paul Simon giving Art Garfunkel a Grammy on behalf of somebody else. Was it Olivia Newton-John? Try and see it on Twitter if you can. Oh, John Lennon's there as well. Oh, man, it's so awkward. Right, OK, cheers, Bobby, you're great, and I'll speak to you soon.
Will do, mate. Thanks for that.
All right, take care, mate. All right, so Deb Grant is next, and we'll see you tomorrow night, and we'll leave you now with The Doors. Ta-ta.
Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. She's walking down the street, blind to every eye she meets. Do you think you'll be the guy to make the queen of the angels sigh? Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. She holds her head so high, like a statue in the sky. Her arms are wicked and her legs are long. When she moves, my brain screams out this song. Sidewalk crouches at her feet, like a dog that begs for something sweet. Do you hope to make her see you, fool? Do you hope to pluck this dusky jewel? Hello, 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 hello. I want you.
Prepare to exit the parallel universe.
Marc Riley
BBC Six Music.
And shut the door on your way out.